Okay, one of the things I'd like to clarify is the transactions that take place on the actual servers. Now we've looked at the packets, but I thought it'd be good to do a little interactive explanation of how the actual packets transfer from one server to another, just where these answers are coming from. So we've been building our DNS server. So that's our DNS server, which is our entire service at the moment, just one machine, but we'll expand it. But basically what we've done is we've taken our client machine and what we've done is we've fired off a request. Now there's two places information can be stored on this DNS server. One of them is our zone files that we create. So that would be something like our student.co. Get that right. Doesn't look very good. Let's do it again. So that would be our, say, student.co.uk. And the other resource we have on this server would be our cache. Now the cache is basically where, when any transaction is carried out, it stores it. That is if it isn't stored already through one of our actual main database files. So that's the two sources we've got. So the student one, and this here is our cache. So let's have a look at a transaction. Well, okay, query one. Query one, we'll do a straightforward lookup for something that's in the student. So we'll look up for www.student.co.uk. From here, we send the request to our server. So that's query one. So query one fires off its transaction. It goes into the DNS server and it actually can identify it from in here. Because it's already locally stored, what it will do is it can respond directly to us with an answer. So the answer comes straight back to us. So that's response one. So the query hit the server, response came out, and we get the answer straight back. Okay, so what's the next way this could happen? Well, the next way it could happen is, let's say I do a query for Google and I'm using a forwarder somewhere on the network, on the internet, say. Well, now what's going to happen is that forwarder is sat on the internet somewhere. So I'll just call that my forward DNS. And what happens is, next time I do a query, so query 2, so query 2 comes in from here. So this is query 2. And what happens now is the actual query hits my server. It's not associated with one of the databases I've already created. So what it will do is it will actually look in here. And there's nothing there. So because there isn't anything there, the DNS server will now forward that request on. Now what happens is, so this is still query 2. So query 2 hits our forwarded DNS. Now we don't know what our forwarded DNS is going to do. So there's a big question mark here for us because we don't know what's going to happen there. But what it will do is we've handed off the responsibility of where to get the answer. So what's going to come back now is a response. So we get response 2 coming back from the forwarded DNS. It comes back to our DNS server and two things now happen. Firstly, we actually get the response from query 2 sent directly back to the client. However, what we also do is that query is then also, the result is added to our cache. So we now have an entry in our cache for that search. So if that was www.google.com, that is now stored in here. We now have an entry for it. Now it'll be stored there for a certain amount of time based on the TTL value. We'll come on to that later. But let's say we now have another query. Now, not from the same machine, because if we did it from the same machine, if we sent off query 2 again, what it would do is it would come back and say, oh, well, it's already stored here as well, locally on our resolver. So what we'll do is we'll assume that that resolver is clear, or we're doing this from a different machine. So what's going to happen now? Okay, let's start it as though it's a new machine altogether. Let's take this away so it'll be a bit clearer. But bear in mind that that entry is now stored in here. So another machine comes along. And this one does a query for www.google.com. So it will send off its query. So that query comes in, and this is query 3. Now, query 3 is for www.google.com. So what's going to happen? Let's tidy that up. Well, what's going to happen now is this query comes in, hits our DNS server, but it it doesn't need to go over to the forwarder anymore, because the query comes in and it's locally stored in the cache. Because it's not stored it's not a student domain, it doesn't even look at this, it doesn't need to. But what it will do before it would go off to the forwarder is check the cache, and it has a result, or has a response there. So what it will do is it will send that response. So that's my response to query 3, and nothing is required to be forwarded. What happens then is we have the result, and the local resolver will now hold a copy of that as well. Now, both of these records stored on my local resolver and in the cache will expire at some stage, or we could flush them out. But at this stage, any query from my machine now, if I ran that query again, so query 4 comes out, query 4 would simply return back to myself. It wouldn't even generate any network traffic. So that's the actual full breakdown of the transactions and the communications that are required based on doing a search for something that is locally stored in the DNS, something that is being forwarded and then cached, and also the issue we have with the local resolver optimizing how the queries run. Okay, let's get back to the next session.